Blog Talk Radio.
Good evening and welcome from the sun and fun capital of the United States, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. This is Dr. John Stamey, and welcome to ScaryCast, the best of the best for paranormal on the internet. We're so glad to have everybody here listening with us tonight. We've got our panelists, we've got our guests, and we've got some surprising and fun stuff to listen to and go from there. So first of all, I want to introduce the Surgeon General of ScaryCast, Dr. Trey Donaway. How are you doing, Trey?
I'm doing great, John. Speaking of doctoring, it sounds like you need something with your throat. What's going on?
Oh, I've got something. I've got something right here, and I'm sure it will fix my voice, so that's okay. But I couldn't miss tonight for the world. It's gonna be too good, and thank you for asking. You're such a good primary care physician, surgeon, and all-around good guy, and we're just glad to have you here. So thanks for being here, buddy, okay?
Happy to be here.
All right, good. And our man from West Hollywood, as Graham Greene would say, and our man from Havana, the one and only Devin Tate. Devin, how are you doing tonight?
Hey, I'm doing really good. I've actually got a big test coming up on Friday, so I've been studying for that, but I'm happy to take a break and be part of ScaryCast.
What are you studying for,
we're glad
Devin?
to have you.
I'm studying to be certified as a leader in place management. So I know most of you, think of me probably as a musician first, but my day job is in urban place management for Hollywood, California. So I'm trying to get my certification.
Oh, very good. Well, good luck.
Thank you.
And like some of us, he has a real job, but that's great. Devin, thank you for being here. You're our longest running co-host. And it's been years since we started this, and thank you for being here. And now our guests tonight. First of all, we have Mark Johnston from Niagara, Canada. Is it Niagara Falls, Canada, or Niagara, Canada, Mark?
Yeah, Niagara Falls is great. It's great to be back on your show, John. I know it's been, 3 years since I was first on, and I've been on a number of your shows, but it's been a while, and I'm glad to be back in touch with you and talking with you again.
We're glad to have you, and also I'm glad to announce that Mark Johnston is the producer of ScaryCast on YouTube, and he's the guy putting everything up and making it all work, and we can't do that one without you, so thanks a lot. Really appreciate it, and we've got a long way to go. We've got some great guests coming up. Oh, my God, next week. Can't wait to tell everybody about that guest when the show is getting ready to get over. And from Odessa, Missouri. Now, that just sounds like Nowheresville, but we've got a big somebody from Odessa, Missouri. This is Brendan Beechner, and he is a psychic, and he's in everything. So, Brendan, how are you doing tonight?
I'm great. I'm actually suffering from a little Orovision headache, but everything else is great other than that. So,
well,
nice
we're glad to have you
be around.
And I know you've got some stories for us. So what we're going to do is we're going to start out with Mark. Oh, no, first of all, we're going to be playing a little bit of a game. And this is an interesting game. It's called How Did He Die? Now, I'm sure everybody would like to know what that game's about. Well, we have picked a very, very famous man in history. And there is information out there about what he had, what was wrong with him, and how he died. But how he really died is a mystery. So I have sent Dr. Trey Donaway a little bit of a dossier about how he died. And the name of this man is Mozart, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, one of the most famous, actually, I believe the greatest composer in history. And I know he's listening. I know he is because he was listening earlier today, and we were aware of that. But anyway, what we're gonna do before we get going with our interviews, we're going to talk to Mark, and then we're going to talk to Brendan. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to play for 3 minutes Mozart's greatest, what I believe is the greatest thing that he ever did. It came from the Mass that he wrote at the end of his life that he was paid to write which ultimately weakened him to the point that he died. And so we're going to play Mozart's Lacrimosa, and then we're going to go into Mark's interview and then Brendan's interview, and then we're going to talk to Dr. Trey, and he's going to give us what does it look like he died from, and then I'll tell everybody a fascinating story of some spiritual communication that happened earlier today. So right now, the one and only Mozart's Lacrimosa, the greatest piece of classical music, in my opinion, ever. Better than Beethoven, better than Bach. And it's trying to play right now because that's kind of the way this thing is. And so we'll have some music here in just a second. Yeah, so anyway, ScaryCast, we're glad to have everybody here. And it will start playing. I know it'll start playing. It should be playing here really quickly. Well, it's not, of course. Of course, we're having technical difficulties. You know how technical difficulties are. They just happen. So I guess we'll go on into our interview, and we'll see if I can get this to play. But anyway, Mark Johnston, you've got a
Before I start, though, my story, I just want to comment on two things first. So our friend in Hollywood there, I watched his documentary.
Oh,
that was awesome. The L.A. River people. That was pretty cool.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Well, Mozart decided to play.
Right.
So we'll listen to Mozart.
I live in LA, and so I could understand exactly those areas he was at and everything, and that was pretty cool to see that documentary. I was interested in that.
That doesn't sound very Mozartian.
Wherever you are. There's no time to hesitate. Let it happen naturally.
This is the world's worst control for. Okay, there we go. Anyway, yes, Mark, go ahead and say some good things about Devin's documentary because it was wonderful.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. I watched that one. And it was interesting to see just in LA because I'm familiar with the area. I used to live there in downtown LA and everything. It was interesting to see and hear the stories of that.
All right, so now we have Mozart, and then you can compliment Devin on Mozart, his greatest hit, the Lacrimosa from The Last Mass that he wrote, and we'll talk a little bit more about Mozart at the end of the show. And now, Mark Johnston, you were saying some nice things about Devin Tate. Go ahead and restart that because I think everybody would like to hear that.
Well, I watched a few of the previous podcasts for this on the ScaryCast, and just to keep in touch with what you guys have been doing lately. And I heard Devin's documentary, and you sent me a link to that, and I watched that, and it was very interesting because I'm familiar with Los Angeles myself. I lived there for 2 years, and very familiar with the downtown area, so that was cool to see that. And it was interesting to see. I can imagine, there's something strange going on there in Hollywood for sure, and Los Angeles in general, as far as things go. With if you think about conspiracies or whatnot, there's definitely interesting history there, and I think there's something to that. Absolutely.
It's a really good documentary, don't you think?
Yeah, 100%. So just before I go into my story there, also I want to touch base on Trey there. You were talking about dowsing, and in the first podcast he was a little bit skeptical, but then eventually, from my understanding, you went to his house, and him and his family got into the dowsing, and there was a bit of an epiphany moment there. Am I correct?
Absolutely. I mean, it didn't do anything for me. It didn't do anything for my wife. My daughter got it in her hands. It was just astounding. And she looked at me and she said, "Dad, I'm not doing anything." And it was in the same places where John had found positive. So we've got another experiment set up. I've got a couple of places in the house in town, and we're going to have John go in there, and I'm not going to tell him where we found hits. We're going to let him find them and see if they're the same.
Well, the reason why I brought it up though was with me going into what I'm going to talk about with the Bigfoot, it was always something I was interested in, but it's not something sometimes until you experience firsthand when you really get that epiphany moment and realize that there's something more to this than what meets the eye, correct?
Well, yeah, and it's funny. I was talking to my plumber, and I said, "Do you ever use dowsing rods?" And he goes, "Absolutely, we use them all the time." And he said, and my dad, who's a plumber, he was in Vietnam as a soldier, and this is how he'd find hidden tunnels. Cool. There you go.
I think there's something to it. I think there's something to it, whether it's tapping into our inner reflexes of what we call psychic or subconscious. We have all these reflexes in our body, and if you were to attach dowsing rods to a robot and send a robot in on something, would robot find things, or does it have to be a human tapping into it to really get that directional component to it?
Interesting question. One of the questions we came up with was John knows about J.B. Rhine and the Rhine Institute and the ESP perception of different figures of cards. And some people do better than others. And we were just wondering if there's a correlation between the ability to do dowsing rods as opposed to compared to that of some form of precognition or ESP.
From my understanding of it, it's kind of like a biofeedback system where it's like electromagnetic component of the body. There's some reflex that kind of that we don't have direct conscious attention to, but it's there, and then you just need those tools to kind of point you in the right direction, if you know what I'm saying.
Right. Well, it was very interesting.
Cool. Well, that is my story because. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, Trey and I, on a subsequent podcast, we talked about the reticular activation system in our brain, where our brain forms a mesh to look for things, and it's like I'm beginning to understand the idea of it a little bit more. I want to do some more research, but the fact is, our brain can hone into things, and that's something that happens in the brain stem, a magnificent organ. I mean, just probably one of the most magnificent organs in our body is the brain stem, and it does a lot of work. And one is that it can start filtering things that we never thought were possible. So you're going to be doing.
John, I wasn't going to touch upon this. I wasn't going to touch on this, but in my work, I do massage, and we work with both mechanical components of the body and reflexive, and I very much could see this being a reflexive component, one that is more subtle and one that is easily overlooked in the science field and everything else. So I hope you send me some, and I hope I can try them out, and let's see what,
yeah,
what we can do.
I was going to say with what you said, though, John, if I could interject real quick.
Yeah, sure.
I was going to say with what Nikola Tesla talks about a lot, with the frequency manipulation and the vibration that you can find in the universe, kind of like your third eye or maybe even your pineal gland is like the conduit of which to tune into the point of the universe. And basically, whatever frequency that you were talking about, like tune into, your body can be almost like a surrogate, or, you know, even just your own personal hard drive, which hack the universe that we live in, or some call the energy hologram, which they've talked about on certain FOIA documents.
Well, I mean, I think you're 100% right, because the body learns to filter things. And my story is, I drove down a stretch of highway. I could not find any businesses that met the criteria we were going to sell to, and I did some thinking about it that night. The next day, I found 20 in the same expanse of the highway. So, I mean, this is like our body can learn and adapt, or our brain can learn and adapt. And there's so much more we have to learn about it. And in 100 years, it will be commonplace knowledge. But right now, we're learning about it. It's a brilliant thing. So, yeah, Brendan, that was a very good comment. It really was. Well, I'm glad to know that Tesla is just, you know, he's about as they just didn't come any better than him. So we'll have a show on Tesla, and we'll invite you on for that. But anyway, all right, Mark, tell us about your great Bigfoot story, because that is a wonderful, wonderful story. It really is.
Yeah, well, like I was saying before, you know, I was always something I was interested in it, but I'm a skeptic when it comes to anything paranormal. You know, I'm one of those scientific guys that, you know, I want to see the hard evidence and things, and, you know, you can have anecdotal things, but it's not until, like, sometimes you experience it that then that's a lot of times we have those epiphanies, correct? And it wasn't until I experienced this with the story I'm going to tell you that it really opened my eyes up to the potential of what is actually going on here, just directly beyond our perception, potentially in the world. And I know from what I've experienced, I'm about to tell you, it really reshaped my vision of reality and what it is. So anyway, it was a time where I was just about to leave to Europe to go on. I was going to move to Europe, to Spain, and I went on one last camping trip where I was living in the Rocky Mountains in British Columbia, Canada. And we went on this camping trip, and we went in the deep in the mountains, camping overnight trip. And the next day, we ended up going to, long story short, to like a copper mine where we were going to explore. And we went deep in the mine, everything, explored it, and was walking out. And it was just when we were walking out that we noticed, like, above us was this, like, chute in the mine that went directly above us. And we all looked up, and, like I said, long story short, up in there was something that weighed 500-plus pounds, 400, 500-plus pounds in a fetal position directly above us. And, like me and my friends, we were used to spotting bears, moose, elk, all of the above that would be a size that big, and it met none of those characteristics of what it looked like the hair quality, the size, like the shape of the size and everything, and not to mention where it was located up in this cave, that it met no requirements of like what we would expect a normal wildlife of the area to be in the Rocky Mountains. So like a bear, you know, if you think of like a black bear or like the fur quality of that, it was nothing like that. It was more of a wispy, long kind of like surfers, or like what you think like a hippie's like hair would be, like a long kind of wavy hair. So it really didn't meet the characteristics of something we'd expect. And upon further inspection, we just thought that it was very unique, and obviously it was in a cave, and it's nothing that I have 100% hard evidence, but if we just did like deduced like what it could be and couldn't be, and based on the size parameters and everything else, it meant nothing that we could have expected in the location it would have been for a bear or anything else. So we definitely think that Bigfoot was something that it would have been could be a possibility, because really And in the area too, there's a lot of it's an area that is of high sightings, a lot of history, even going back to the native tales of the area, like all the native folklore of the area. Because like you were talking about folklore last week about lizard man and things like that, right? Of the area. Well, this area also has its own folklore as well, and Bigfoot plays a part in that. So that's definitely there. So it's just like if you're checking off the list of what it could be, you know, I wish I had better story, to be honest. I'm just seeing, like, I wish I had more detail. But to be honest, I don't think it was a bear, and that's the only other thing that it possibly could have been. So, you know, I remember talking to you about this 3 years ago, and I think we saw something Bigfoot there, 100%.
Absolutely, and I mean, if you know it's not, you know what you saw. You know it was not a bear.
Yeah.
So that's what I've got to say. And Devin, you're kind of our lizard man of LA people. You know that what you're talking about. There are too many stories out there that this is not a nothing burger with the lizard man or the lizard people of LA, correct?
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of stories in the newspaper, even stuff you can just find really easily.
Right. I mean, it's an amazing story, and it's a shame that with the technology that we have now, that we're not going down there trying to find those tunnels and everything, because I have a feeling they're there. But that's just me. I have a feeling they're there. I don't have any real hard evidence, but I just think it's interesting. And everybody, now, Martin, did you put a link to his to Devin's documentary on our Facebook channel? I mean, on our YouTube channel?
No, but I can put one in the description of this podcast when I post that. I'll post it in the description if anybody's listening.
Okay, great, thanks, because I want people to know where they can go take a look at it and see. I mean, this is a really good. It's a really good documentary, and I enjoyed it a lot. So again, thanks, Devin, for those comments, and Mark for that story. I mean, I think it's a really interesting story. All right, so that is your story as an experiencer. Do you have? I don't think you do, but do you have any other paranormal experiencer stories to share? You might not, but I was just wondering.
Me? Of course I do. So when I was just in BC last time, I was living on this native reserve there. It's called the Shuswap Reserve. And there, on that was a very old church. So we were explored the church quite a few times and always wondered, this has got to be a ghost place, because it's like dating back to definitely the late 1800s. So I remembered hearing this thing you can do where you take a flashlight and you unscrew it just to the right amount so it either turns on and off a flashlight, right? You ever have those, like those twist-off flashlights? And so we twisted it so it's just turned off, or it could turn on if with just a little nudge, and we put it on a table and we were asking it questions, and sure enough, we were getting responses, like a very adamant response. It wasn't just like, you know what I mean, turned on. It was like, hey, is anybody here? And it was like, ding, 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 ding. Like it was flashing crazy when before it wasn't, right? So I don't know if there's something with the electromagnetic field of like the area, or like, you know, with ghosts, like if you think haunted areas or whatnot, what's going actually on there, if there's something that's physically recorded to the physical realm of that area, or like if through us that we're kind of conjugating something. But definitely there was a responsive thing to this electromagnetic field of the flashlight when we unscrewed it just to the right amount, and we were getting responses. So it was getting like dings for sure.
Wow. Well, that's pretty cool. You've got,
maybe we got to get some dowsing rods there next time, and then we'll see too. We'll see what we got.
Okay, well, you should now. As I was told by the post office, it may take 2 weeks to get them there, but we'll get them there, and all that. So you can let us know. You can report back to us about the experiences that you have, and we'll talk with Trey about those too, because he's learned a bit, and I can't wait to get. Trey has a property currently called the George Washington House in Camden, South Carolina, and I cannot wait to get there and try to find the same hot spots that his daughter, because Trey, I take it your daughter went through and found some hot spots, correct?
Yeah, I had to go through all the rooms, and there's one place in particular that, I mean, she just started to laugh. It was so strong, and she could step 1 foot onto the spot and then 1 foot back from the spot, and it would change the direction. I mean, it was like a switch. It was either on or off, depending on where she stepped. It was pretty remarkable.
Okay, well now let me ask you a quick question about this, and I don't think this will hamper what I'm going to do. Is there any chance that there was an electrical conduit or something directly below the that piece of floor?
I mean, I guess there could be a chance. But now remember, this is an 18th century home. So we don't have, there are no overhead lights. There's an overhead light in one room, and that's it. Because 18th century, you didn't have overhead lights unless they were hanging from a hook in the ceiling. So, and the way this house was wired, when you could get electrical wiring in, it's not like you're going to be running it through the floor. So, I don't believe so.
Have you had any other paranormal experiences there? Have you had any other like paranormal things like over the years, like weird movements in the corner of your eye or anything like that that's happened there?
We have had one thing, and I can't explain it. In the master bathroom, it's a big shower. 2 people can take a shower at once. It's got 2 shower heads, so it's a great place to give your kids a bath. So when Michael, my oldest, was young, I'd taken my shower, he was taking a shower, and he was in the bathroom, and we were horsing around, and I chased him out of the bathroom, and he went through our bedroom and then out the bedroom door, and my wife was in the hall, and she was doing folding laundry, and she looked to the side, and she saw something fly at Michael, and she thought I had thrown something at him, and she says, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, I'm not doing anything." She said, "What did you throw at Michael?" And now we are moving in one direction, and this object flew the opposite direction, and it was my grandfather's hairbrush, and it was sitting on top of a dresser. And I always think of the electric football games where the guys kind of vibrate around. Remember the electric football games 1,000 years ago? And when you walk in the house, there's motion on the floor because it's an old house. And if that just had wiggled its way off the top of the dresser, it would have just fallen down in front of the dresser. But it didn't. It flew off the top and ended up almost hitting our bed. And it probably flew about 4 feet. And I can't explain that. It was moving opposite to the direction. We were running, horsing around. I was chasing Michael out of the bedroom, and this brush went the opposite direction, and we weren't right on it. I mean, we were a good 6 feet away from where that was, and
that's the
the
only
thing
thing
flew
you've
the
had
opposite direction.
That's the only thing you've noticed that. Is that the only thing that you noticed that as being like misplaced or moved or anything, or have you noticed things being moved on you before or anything like that?
Oh, something moves my wallets and my keys all the time, no matter where, for as long as I've been alive.
Okay, well,
it might just be because I don't pay attention when I get rid of my wallet and my keys. But no, we've never noticed anything else in the house. That was the only anything near paranormal. That was it, and it was just that once. Okay. And
what about when you're
living
sleeping?
In a house for about what's that?
When you're sleeping, do you wake up to any sleep disturbances or anything in the house or anything like that?
No, I'm a general surgeon. When I go to sleep, I don't wake up unless it's the phone. But now my wife
in haunted houses, that's what I've heard.
My wife would wake
I'm like
up
the complete opposite on
time and she would smell like someone was smoking a cigarette outside a window. There's no window, but that's what it would smell like somebody smoking a cigarette. And that's the only other thing that we couldn't really explain. But, you know, we do have 8 fireplaces in the house, so there's a good chance you're going to have some breezes with some soot smell, perhaps. But that's it. That's it.
That's interesting. There are a lot of houses that have smells from a variety of things that they claim are entities. The Stanley Hotel being one of them, where I was. It was really interesting. They said some of you will smell something, and it's a very particular smell. And so we're standing around there, and I smelled the smell of snuff. Now, Trey, do you know what snuff is, right?
I know what it is, but I wouldn't. I mean, I'd recognize the tobacco smell, but I wouldn't recognize the snuff smell. So
right. Well, I was just wondering.
Like tobacco,
and Devin, I don't know if you know what the smell of snuff is, but it is like a variant of tobacco, and it has a very sweet. It has a very sweet smell to it. And I'm standing there, and I said, and all of a sudden this smell came around me, and I said, hey, it's the smell of snuff, like Railroad Mills or something. And the guy said, oh, my God, you got it right. It's not the smell of pipe tobacco or anything. It's the smell of snuff. So, I mean, I've had that. That was at the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado, and it was kind of an interesting ghost tour. The ghost kept hanging around. Yeah.
If you were to like sense some type of memory of a location, say like the psychic phenomenon where somebody goes in and senses like something happened there, like a memory of that area, you know, how tied are memories in smell? If you think about it, like, have you ever gone to like a festival and smelled cotton candy and being like, boom, that brought you right back to being 6 years old again, like out of nowhere, almost like it was some weird quantum like time leap or something? What if there is like in the brain that has to do with the psychic, the phenomenon of like dealing with that ancient memory and smell itself? Like you always hear perfume, like the old lady in who's haunted, like with the perfume in the area or something. Well, maybe you're tapping into the memory, and the memory is connected to smell.
If you want to
what
talk
about it echo into eternity kind of thing? Like it just replays itself.
Yeah.
Without it being complete quantum entanglement, but it's just kind of
in your limbic system, and smell is one of the primal areas, and so that's one of the prime memory things. I know my grandmother. I had grandparents in Arkansas, and I still can smell their house from time to time. Had a very distinctive smell. I'd smell it anywhere, house. And occasionally I smell it, and it's always pleasant because it reminds me of visiting my grandmother's house. So smell it's one of our senses, and it's a very important one, and it is also deeply rooted in our brain. That's part of our lizard brain, is smell.
Right. But what about this, though? You ever walked into a room and you smelled something unfamiliar, but it smells like somebody's cologne that you've never met? But, like, you were in the room 5 minutes ago or less. Okay. I'm the only one on that? All right.
So you can smell something, but it could it be a scent that was in the room when you walked in, and no more than that?
No, because I was in the room, like, 5 minutes prior to that, smoking a cigarette, and like that's how I know. Like the control was like the smell that I smelled before. I went downstairs to get a soda, use the restroom, all that good stuff. Maybe like even get like a sort of good snack or whatever. But besides that, the whole point I was trying to make was just like I came up into like a waft of just a musk of like I couldn't define the smell of what it was. I knew it was cologne, but I couldn't ever pinpoint it to any memory. There was no memory of the cologne, so I was like, either the previous owner of the house, who's dead and passed on, is maybe checking forward, or maybe, just anything's possible. And it's just like, it could have even been
when you first entered
smell.
the room. When you first entered the room, you're smoking a cigarette.
No. Before I left the room, way before I left the room, like probably 5 to 10 minutes ago, I'd already finished that cigarette. I'm saying, and then like after that, the gap in between going downstairs and coming back up was another 5 to 10. Then I came upstairs.
But when you entered the room, were you smoking the cigarette, or did you smoke the cigarette
finished,
once you were in the room?
The cigarette was already finished at that point.
No, what I was saying is the first time you were in the room, if you were smoking the whole time, maybe the scent of the cigarette smoke would have masked whatever you smelled later. Or
no, because like I've always had the same cigarette brand. I've always smelled them, and I've kind of gotten to the point where I'm basically immune to like the type of cigarette that I smoke. So I don't smell it.
Okay.
Even when I can leave the room and come back.
That wouldn't mask. You could still detect another scent, even if you're smoking a cigarette.
Because like I have my window basically cracked a little bit. What's up?
So I think I might have an explanation. So just like dowsing, where I'm thinking that there's some type of reflexive response that's kind of subtle in the body that we're not attentive to, that got activated, whether it's electromagnetic or something that's initiating the biofeedback of the rods. Maybe there's some type of reflexive response, just like a knee-jerk reaction. Now that one's more obvious. It's not so subtle. But maybe there are more subtle ones that we have that are, quote, psychic to potential, like, sensing area. Like, say, you walk into a house where there's a lot of people who died horrible deaths or something. Maybe there's a reflexive in our body that senses that's beyond our attention. And if we're in tune with, like, it could come in the form of a smell. It could come in a chills down our spine. It could come in different ways, right? And I think that's I think what we're getting at here is there's something very scientific that's just basic reflexes. I think that's
it. But is it your psyche itself summoning it? Or is it just like kind of like you're sensing another realm or something like just like paranormal that you're not sure of where it's coming from in general?
Well, like if you think about all the way I see it is like, you know, our visual spectrum is only a small part of the electromagnetic spectrum. The electromagnetic magnetic spectrum is huge, right? Now there's different frequency bands and things, and we're tapped into that, but not in our attentive realm. But there's a subconscious one that is, and we might get like, have you ever gotten a gut feeling or something about something when something's not right? It's like
I mean that's where your intuition and sensory organ is at.
Yeah, there's nothing attentive that is telling us there's something wrong, but there's a reflex that's happening. What if you're tuned into it? Some people are more than others in different ways.
Right.
But there's kind of a reflexive reaction that we have that is like a knee-jerk reaction, but a little bit more subtle than that, right? And it could be goosebumps. It could be, goosebumps is a reflex. It's a muscle reflex in our skin. There's other reflexes in our body that even goes back to child. And if you think about children, they might sense paranormal more than we do because they have different reflexes in us. Babinski reflex and things like that. They're in tune in different ways to their nervous system, the autonomic and parasympathetic nervous system and things like that. We're as we get older, we're not as in tune, in some ways, not all of us anyway. We forget how to be, in tune with ourselves and our true feelings. And I think that might be a big part of, who's good at dowsing rods, for example, or my work, who's good at massage and things like that, right? There's a reflexive component there. I really believe in that. And just listening to your guys' podcast the other day, that's what came to mind. I wanted to relay that to you guys today.
Well, when you think about it, if people can detect auras, some people can see them, some people can sense them. So
I'm at the point I can see full astral projection. So
and others don't sense anything, but maybe the ascent could be a way, just another interpretation of an aura or some energy that some people can detect and others can't. Some people might do this in a sense basis rather than visual or the feeling.
John played that Mozart, right? You know how some people get the chills when they hear certain music? You hear that song, the Mozart song, and you're like, oh, that gets the chills. Some people don't get the chills. You gotta wonder why do some people get it and some people don't. So why do some people cry when they hear music and some people nothing? Right? It's a reflexive component of sensing the music, or sensing that energy.
Chakra system is tuned in the C major scale all the way from C up to B. So all the notes in between would be your solfege and kind of like the sacred chakra point. So it's like you're basically melding with the music, feeling it not only from your sensory organs, but also your energy body as well. And with that, whatever emotion you feel after that is your body's natural resonance to residing with that. Like when I listened to the Mozart thing that we were talking about in the beginning, it was just like my mind felt like it was healed again, just from like all the pain, and like my headache just disappeared. So it was just nice, but yeah.
Well, absolutely, and I've got to. This is Dr. John. I've got to share something with everybody. It was about a year ago, and I don't know if you've ever done this, but have you ever gotten upset with someone who has died? Very upset with them. And for some reason, I got upset with my mother. I shouldn't have, but I did. And the entire next day, all I could smell was her perfume just here in my place. And she had a very, it was like a kind of a mid-grade perfume that you bought at the drugstore. But I smelled that for an entire day. It was like she was saying, I'm sorry, or I just want to be around you because you were upset about me. And it was amazing. And I had a couple of experiences with Bigfoot. Robin tells me there's one that likes the smell of a skunk. So I'm driving along in my car with the windows rolled up, and all of a sudden I smell a skunk. And I mean, it is undeniably the smell of a skunk. I don't have anything going on that's going to pull that air from outside to inside. And it went along for about 12, 13 minutes. And I called Robin. She said, and I can't remember the name of the Bigfoot. She said, sometimes he'll just attach himself to you. And so I've had some interesting experiences with smells that just don't follow the normal pattern of what people would say life is. So, it's kind of interesting. But my mom, and then the smell of that Bigfoot, and the smell of the skunk in my car lasted so long. I mean, normally if you drive through an area where there's a skunk, you might smell something for maybe a minute, but not for 10 to 12 minutes. It just doesn't work like that. So, I mean, it's just interesting, some of the things that I've experienced, and I guess they're the paranormal or whatever. But that's good. Well, so first of all, Mark, thank you for your thoughts and your story. And I want you to stick around because we got Brendan next. He's from Missouri, and he is a bit of a psychic, a bit of a... Well, Brendan, why don't you explain to us what you do? I know that sometimes when we talk, you tell me about things that you have seen and heard, and it is real enough that I said, I think this guy is telling the truth. That's why you're on here on ScaryCast. So tell us a little bit about what you do, and you've got a couple stories you wanted to, I think you have 3 stories you wanted to share, so if you don't mind, let's get on with it, buddy.
Okay. All right, well, let's see, with what you were saying, I mean, talking about being a psychic, all throughout growing up, I didn't realize I was one, and my mom and my mom's mom, which would be my grandma, Martha, who's in the afterlife, may she rest in peace. I just don't get to talk to her as much because she's kind of always visiting all the family members and watching them and talking about her deathbed wish. But no, I mean, it's just kind of like when you realize after a certain point that, like, you're not hearing voices, like, you don't know if you're not diagnosed schizophrenic or anything like that, and, like, you're hearing, like, pings or vibrations or just, like, different tonal frequencies or anything else that just kind of, like, pulls you into a moment. And it's kind of, like, introspective to where you're, like, cast into a moment of looking at yourself in third-point perspective, meaning that you're out of body almost, but you're not in an OBE. But you're looking at yourself as, like, is this who I've been all along, or is it just, like, I never realized how psychic, like, my mother and, like, her mom were, and, like, where they hid in bars and, like, talked about, like, what they'd seen for the day. And she lived in a haunted house where she housed monks, like, not just, like, Christian monks. Yeah.
Your mother lives in a haunted house? This is kind of where the paranormal
started. Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. I meant to not to forget. But I was trying to say I'm not a mama's boy here. It's the main reason of, like, why paranormal has been following us around since, I think, 1982 to 86, somewhere in there, and even 85. I don't remember exactly how old she was. She said she was, this quick little short story to get in the next one. around a house here in Odessa, which conveniently enough was on Benning Street, and there were flashlights shining in and out and all that from them just doing their stuff, you know, like it was her and her sisters. But her sisters went inside, and she looked up like at the last minute and saw there were still flashlights going back and forth, like left and right, flicking on and off, flicking on and off. She couldn't tell where they were coming from, and like she was just kind of like kept looking around for them. It was like even went upstairs to like check the room, but the room was empty. Like after she got up there, but her sisters weren't in the house yet. They were still like probably a click in front of her, if that. But yeah, and with that, she's just had a lot of paranormal experiences that I myself haven't had simultaneously with her, but every once in a while we felt like goosebumps at the same time. And this town is actually founded around like 1700, 1800 with Russian descendants that came into this town and, you know, made ties. And this town is actually, the name translates to Wrath of God. So Odessa is the Wrath of God, and from there on after it's just kind of like, you know, blah, 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 a lot of kind of like wushu that most people don't hear about. But yeah, and with that, we all three share the same mark on the right arm. Like it's almost like a birthmark, but it's not quite a birthmark. It's just like this piece of skin that is like, it's almost just pops up. Same two moles on the back of the neck. And it's the weirdest like chart. It's like, it's almost like a vampire bite on the back of the neck and then a little mark on the right arm. And she's like gotten kicked out of Kansas for being left-handed. And when they did the whole Catholic like church stuff, like hardcore, sorry, that or no growth, still just too many places we've moved after that. Just that's what I started to realize was like our main like kind of like connection point was all through like the same type of markings on our body. When we wouldn't ask to learn something, we wouldn't ask for them to teach us, and we would already be able to be clairvoyant or able to guess something in the future without realizing it with, you know, like next thing like they do with Nicolas Cage and everything else, and just kind of like, I've guessed, like asked still to the exact price to like one, like every number on all five. I haven't been able to do it since then. That's fine, but I mean, like, it's just, this whole town's shrouded in mysticism and mythologic like stories, but a lot of them are kind of like about old witches and everything else. So this area is full of like paranormal activity at all times. It's very much of a hot spot depending on which house you go to. A lot of them are 100 to 200, even almost like 300 years old in this area, and they're barely renovating them, which is nice. But
well, I'm going to stop you, and I'm going to say, if you think there are a lot of witches there, what we'll do is we'll get Lady Bridget on. She's the head witch on the East Coast, and she's in Indianapolis, or basically Indianapolis. And so we'll get her on there, and you can kind of like share that with her, and she can give us some insight about the witches that are there. Because I tell you what,
awesome.
We've had some magnificent guests on ScaryCast, and Lady Bridget will be a lot of. Oh, she's a great lady, and I've known her for a long time, and she's great. But anyway, yeah, no, that's cool. Now you have got and you hadn't started on them, but you've got 3 interesting stories. And
I started spitballing and I couldn't slow myself down.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're correct. Apologize for interrupting right away. You had me excited again. And no, what I was gonna say is in the original stories was when I was about 7 to 8, my dad was top of the track team runner for the mile. Had about a 4, I think it was 41 to like a 4:24 or something like that. And my goal was to beat that time, so we were both kind of just out late at night, just kind of like, you know, doing our thing. He was out of high school, obviously, and I was just like, I think middle school or maybe, middle school for sure, and just out walking. And I think he was somewhere out in, like, the country, whereas I was by the highway. But we both looked up in the night sky at the same time, not even realizing it, and just saw, like, all you could see was just, like, it's moving so quick. It's, like, just red dashes of light. He's like, did you see it? I was like, yeah, I saw it. I was like, I tried to draw it down, but, like, I'm just, like, my memory keeps fading on like what it was. Like it happened so quick. And he's like, what was it? I was like, obviously it was a UFO because like it disappeared after like those passes. He's like, I know that. He's like, what do you think? You think government, or do you think it's more like alien extraterrestrial UFO kind of thing? And I was like, I'm going alien UFO here, because I was like, that was gone, and there was a bang after the red lights, and there's nothing left in the night sky, and there's nothing falling down. And I'm like, it was an explosion, not an implosion. So definite like happenstance to be one of the main like paranormal moments that my dad and I both had. And
so now were you and your dad together when that happened?
No, we were in separate locations and compared our notes when we got home. And like I called him like either that night or like the next night or something like that. It was within that time frame. And he said, yeah, I saw the same fucking thing when I was jogging out in the road. And I was like, did it have red lights? I said, yeah. So did it like dash and then like burst it off or something? I was like, yeah. He said, yeah, same thing. And I was like, right on. I mean.
Okay. Well, that's a cool story. And many of us have had UFO experiences, and if you want to know about mine, just go to Amazon.com and type in aliens, UFOs, and anomalies, and my name, John Samey, and you'll find my book. And buy a copy. Support me, please. But no, it's a good book. It's got
John,
a lot of experience.
Jump in there for a sec?
Yeah, sure.
Can I jump in for a sec? So just in telling that story, I had something similar. I'll just say the quick story. I was at my friend's house in the middle of BC, like in the middle of nowhere, and he lives in this yurt. And we were in there listening to music or whatever, and we all go out for a cigarette. And in the darkness where there should have just been just straight dark mystery light set up in the middle of nowhere where like there shouldn't have been anything. It was red, blinking and things like that. And so there potentially there's something to that. I don't know if there's something paranormal kind of the same regards, but I had a similar experience too in the middle of the woods where there shouldn't have been anything. Like it was just like no electricity, no nothing out there. And we saw by my buddy's yurt, like just dark woods, this like what looked like a Christmas tree light display in there one night. And we still talk about it to this day. None of us could explain what that was.
Well, that's interesting because that sounds a lot like the Rendlesham Forest UFO over in England. For those of you who don't know about it, that appeared near an army base, and they went out and investigated it, and some strange things happened. We're certain that Rendlesham Forest happened. We're not exactly sure what happened, but there's a book on it. It's a pretty cool book, and there's a message that has been sent to us. It's a great book. It's a great experience, and I think by and large it's as true as it gets. So we're not the only people that have had experiences like that, Mark. It ought to make you feel good. Some very famous experiences like that. And Brendan, same thing with you and your dad. A simultaneous vision of UFOs. That's really cool. All right, continue on, sir. You got some more stories for us.
Oh yeah. You're correct on that one. I was going to say, if you guys like the fact that there was, just a UFO sighting, I've had only one instance of this. A night where I was abducted. No, I was not aware during the time because it was right when I was almost about to fall asleep. But instead of falling asleep, I felt my body like slip into an unconscious state without going to sleep, and then just all of a sudden slip back and I'm into a conscious state. And I could just have like visions here and there of like what I'd seen that night, like in my dreams the next day or more. And it was just like, after a while I didn't notice anything about it. And like, years later, it's like I didn't think anything of it, but it's just like, when I started to do some of the stuff I looked up in the FOIA documents about the gateway process and everything else, like all that I've ever been able to see is just like there's no UFO on the roof. It's like they were already there in the house and then somehow just came in and then like either manipulated my DNA or just added in kind of like a little bit more of their DNA to me like in that night. And ever since then, I've been able to withstand like way higher temperatures than I've ever thought. And way lower temperatures, and along with the aura vision capability, it's just kind of like that was the night that like I felt like I was never the same because I never sleep, and like I see kind of like a black strip like in front of my eyes the whole night, and then end of the morning, no memory of falling asleep or waking up was the thing. That was the thing that freaked me out the most because I didn't remember falling asleep, I didn't remember waking up, but all of a sudden it was night into morning. Like there was no in between.
Well, you know that there's like different states of like brainwave states. So we have like conscious awake states, and we have different ones like theta brainwave states and whatnot, where it's like more like hypnosis or deep trance states. I think that's where a lot of this, what you would call paranormal or psychic phenomenon, happens when you're in that like deep theta state, as opposed to like our everyday kind of awake alpha state, or whatever you want to call it, like awake state, attentive state, right? We almost need to kind of just like let go of that and go into more of the peripheral kind of like, you know, like just immersive consciousness state, like non-attentive, non-focused.
Right.
And then we can go into like theta brain states. And I think that's where just listening to you, when you're just in that in-between sleep state or whatnot, and some weird stuff is happening, I think that's kind of what it is. It's like that in-between state where we're not in our delta wave brainwave state. We're kind of like in an in-between like frequency wave. Like if you're turning the radio channel over and you just get that in between, like there's something else there.
Right.
You change the
but I
channel.
mean, my eyes were open the whole time is what I'm saying. Like I don't fall asleep with my eyes open. That's the main thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've read about the theta, the delta, and the alpha, like brainwaves. I mean, I'm not going to talk about everything like that I've found in like FOIA documents, but I mean, I understand what you're saying. It's a very profound point, and it's like something that could be provable. But I mean, at the same time, it's just like I was only 9 or 10, maybe 11-ish at that point in my life. And like there had never been a night where I don't remember closing my eyes to fall asleep. And that was my routine ever since I was 3 to 4, was to lay down, close my eyes, and then go to sleep. That night, I didn't even get to close my eyes, and it was the next day is what I'm saying, kind of thing. It was like a bunch of stuff missing.
Yeah. Interesting.
So it was like it just turned black in between, like kind of like just faded. And then like all of a sudden like a fade in, and all of a sudden like, I don't know, like out of the corner of my eye, like in my peripheral, I could have sworn that I saw like what you'd call a white extraterrestrial, depending on your classification chart.
I was going to ask, you think it was some type of like some nighttime visitation experience from something that was like an entity experience?
Yes.
Yeah, cool. I've heard quite a bit of that, and I think I can empathize with that. Yeah.
That's interesting.
I'd never heard anything about it until now, like comparison stories. But no, I mean like with anybody else that's had something similar is all I'm trying to say. So thank you for that confirmation.
If anyone's had anything similar, contact us here at ScaryCast, and we'll get it to Brendan. Absolutely. All right. And now you've got a third story, which I think is very interesting.
This one's recent, too. So, I mean, it's kind of like it's a little bit cooler. It's actually with the book that I started reading from Dana Redfield. I might have said Cassandra Clare the other day, but that would be City of Ashes that I've brought back from my book storage. But yeah, this one was right around like December 25th, like 26th, right into like January 8th. And the book talks a lot about like how you'll have a telepathic communication session with any number of unknown, like, you know, alien species or extraterrestrial origins, and it's like they submit to you visualizations through telepathy, and they say that, like, without saying things out loud, subliminally, you see the image being put in there into your mind's eye, and then might be off on the right process on, like, how it gets in there, but still, and, like, you were able to see what they're trying to show you, which at that time was just, like, little tests, just us kind of, like, you know, like, obviously, it was always into paranormal stuff from a young age. I was always looking for stuff like that. And then just kind of like all I saw was like a vision of like what was going to happen in either 2 days from that time or 2 weeks. I couldn't tell the exact time frame. But all I saw was like the house just exploded out, like, and all everywhere. Like, basically would have been shredded or whatever else, or I don't know, but it was like I saw not only one but two aimed right like at just my house, like when I was practicing things with just a little bit of like what I'd read online with ergokinesis or that and what I called sonokinesis from like just reading different cards and all that. But what had happened was just after that, I kind of freaked out, got into my van, kept having like an intuition vibe that it was like I was going to be late or like I was going to, like I was just having a bad feeling like I was about to fade out. I couldn't tell what was wrong. It just didn't feel right. So I parked over. And then when I got up to the hospital, it was like the van was almost just kind of like highlighted, but not like, like in game. It's just like you could just see like almost like an aura on it. And like the driver was inside. He stopped for the night. He was like, I don't want to go any further kind of thing. Like, I'm done. He was like, I looked in my luggage and I looked what was back there. Finally, he was like, I'm done. I was like, okay. And he was just sitting there, wouldn't move, just kept rocking back and forth kind of thing, just kept rocking back and forth. And so I got into the van because I just kept going based off of intuition and kind of like subliminal suggestions. And there were what I thought were just, 2 oxygen tanks, but they were way too big to be oxygen tanks. And that's all I'm going to leave that one at. And it just kind of didn't seem right. And so, like, when he was shaking like that and there was no markings on there that said O2, that's when I knew something was up. And they looked almost like H-bomb canisters, like, with, like, weapons kind of being dealt in the underground a little bit too silently, and that was kind of like why I think I got summoned there that night. And she talks about like stuff like that happens all the time where crises have to be averted by people quantum fluxing into that exact moment in time and creating an entanglement so that it cannot be reversed or recalled again with anybody else that may be doing things such as like time travel with the Starry Project with CIA kind of stuff. It's like that was the end of that night basically. I got those away from the hospital, left them somewhere. And then that's like right as I was walking away, like the cops were already like coming down the block without anybody even knowing I'd stolen the van or where it had gone. Obviously, there's probably a tracker in it, I'm guessing, but no, it's just they tried to give me a charge of stolen auto before tampering later on, but then after that, I looked at the cops' computer screen, and they were just alternate depictions of my reality that I was in, with a camera like on my room, because I could tell it was my wallpaper. Some of it was painted all the way, some of it was painted just some of the way, and then some of it, Holly was still there on the couch, and the other one, it was like there was nobody on the couch. So it was like just seeing all the different alternate unisons that they had documented somehow and had not told anybody about, and like somehow like that was the last thing I'd like found out about, but couldn't tell if that one was like a prank, maybe from my cousin or something, since he knows a lot of cops and just likes to fuck with me, or if it was just that was like the icing on the cake of like there's a lot more left to go of like what even John talks about in his book. So I mean,
my background's psychology, and there's this one experiment that comes to mind with that, which is a proven experiment, which is like they hook people up to like brainwave EMF or what do you call it, EEG machines or whatnot that measure your brainwaves. And they flash a bunch of images on screen, right? Different random images. Right. And then one of the images then comes and it's porn, okay? Well, right before the porn gets flashed on screen, your brain waves and your body wave state goes crazy. Now it's like anticipating that emotional response. There's something reflexive that's like preparing your body almost in a way for you to experience that emotional, input or whatever it is. And I think like that's where our precognition, like whatever you classify that as, if there's something that's like really crazy that's going to happen that you sense before, it's almost like the same thing. It's like we have something within us that primes ourselves to have that emotional experience that is going to happen, or whether
almost kind of like an adrenal rush
in your case. Yeah,
with
something like that.
The limbic system being on high alert, but it's like almost a different frequency. Okay.
And now, you wouldn't even know you were watching a movie, and then it primed it for the next segment. Does that come intrinsically, or is that from an extrinsic, or did they set up the film so it primed you to get ready to take you to a different level?
There was no priming. It was like flashing, from my understanding, flashing different images, and I can look this exact experiment up, but I remember we were told this directly in our school. And it was just the fact that before the pornography got played on screen, there was like whatever our body was being attached to, being monitored, whatever with the scopes or whatever, something went off the charts right before it flashed something that was maybe it was like a murder image or something, right? That got flashed, or something of high emotional state. And our body, there's like almost like a big like wave that happened just prior to that, and they've actually got this measured. This is actually real science, from my understanding.
I know
they've actually done.
They used to do advertising in movies where they would do a quick flash of whatever they're trying to sell.
Oh, you're talking about the subliminal advertising where they try to get kids and everybody else to like smoke cigarettes and like
right,
a little snapshot of like, oh, soda or a cigarette. Yeah, okay.
That's right. Or flashing lights can induce epileptic seizures. So they're visual triggers that can act on the neurohormonal pathways in the brain that do different things. So that could be part of that system.
Yeah, but Trey, the thing is, though, this was like before there was any clue. There was no pre-clue to this, right? So it was like your body that was hooked up to these machines was sensing something before the image was even displayed to you. Like there was something that was priming our body to experience that emotional state. If you know what I'm saying, that's what I think their conclusion was.
But what was the methodology of priming? Was it visual or electric?
There's no priming. That's the thing. So it could have just been like flashing random images of like anything, children playing on a playground or just like some traffic or whatever. You just got random images. Mm-hmm. But then there was just all of a sudden porn being on screen, right? Like like hardcore something, and just before that, our body, like that was hooked up to machines, was sensing it before that image was, or that stimulus was even on the screen. So it was like there was a precognition involved here.
Time out. That result is about a 1970 result in the Journal of Parapsychology, edited by John Palmer. That they did that experiment at the Ryan Research Institute, and nobody looks at the Journal of Parapsychology. It's got great pure research, but they had that result prior to this. And it's like what happened is just like seconds before something happened, the body anticipated what was going to happen, and they were able to measure it. So yes, this is reality. This is the reality of our bodies and our lives. So I had to jump in there with that and give a plug for the Journal of Parapsychology. It's a great journal. It's one of the, and we're just lucky to have it, but very few people ever read it. But it's that result. Just call John Palmer at the Ryan Institute, and he'll tell you that result is
what
right
would you
there.
Call it, John? Precognition? Would you call it precognition? What would you call it?
Is any of that in the FOIA documents?
I don't know what I would call it, but I would call it proof of precognition, and the fact that our bodies sense things before they happen. So I guess that's what I would call it, and I may try to find it or call John Palmer and see if I can get that article. I think it would be a good article to share with a lot of people, because it's an early article, early on, and it just shows the great research that's done at the Ryan Research Institute. It really does. And I'm sure Dr. Sally Ryan Feather will like it when I call her and tell her that she was talked about favorably on ScaryCast. Maybe we'll be so lucky as to get the true queen of ESP. If we could get Sally Ryan Feather on here, that would be the greatest. That would be the greatest episode since Ed Wood's daughter. And I can't remember her name.
I think we got a precognition of the next ScaryCast right there. I think we're sensing that one. I think she's the next guest, right?
It won't be the next one, because we've got a blockbuster guest, and we're going to talk about that guest. So Brendan, thanks for those stories. First of all, they're great, and because I do not want to fail to mention. Now, we played Mozart's Lacrimosa at the beginning of this episode of ScaryCast after we finally got everything working. Now, Trey, did you get the information on Mozart's death?
I did, John, and I did look it over, and I have no idea. The two factual, as far as facts go, the two eyewitnesses said before his death he vomited and it was brownish fluid. And then the other thing was that, according to his daughter, he had a lot of swelling. He became it sounds like edematous before his death. So there were speculations as to poisoning, certainly infectious disease in the late 18th century, and into the 19th century. Infectious disease was the leading cause of death from any number of pathogens. So it didn't sound cardiac. It didn't sound neurologic. It might have involved renal failure. That was one of them. There was a speculation it could have been rheumatic fever. But again, it didn't sound necessarily cardiac in origin, because that, even in the 18th century, they recognized heart problems as a wind up to death. So I'm not sure what I would take a stab at. He didn't have bowel obstruction. If he's vomiting up brown material, it didn't sound like coffee ground emesis, so I don't think it was a GI bleeding problem. And with the edema, it could have been. I think it certainly affected his kidneys. That would have given him the edema more than just congestive heart failure or some primary cardiac problem. So I would guess I wouldn't have any idea. There could be so many different things. So I don't get a clear image based on what I just read, which was just basically Wikipedia. But I don't know. There's my professional medical opinion.
Well, and we appreciate that. Now I'm going to tell you, a psychic was told something by Mozart today, and I want you to see if it's even possible. But they were told the real diagnosis was tuberculosis with complications. Is that even possible from what you said?
It doesn't correlate at all with the historic record that we have available. It never seemed pulmonary in origin. Tuberculosis was a wasting disease, so he wouldn't have been edematous. It would have been the opposite. That's why they called it consumption, because it would consume the body, and it would definitely center around respiratory symptoms. You don't have to have respiratory symptoms. You can have other forms of tuberculosis, but by and large, it's respiratory, and he didn't display any of that. So I wouldn't think that would be correct.
Can I jump in here
at the time, in the time of Mozart's death, he would not have been aware of what tuberculosis was. So that would have only occurred.
Like the history of medicine, right? Like going back to that time period, whatever, they might have tried to cure things like that with things like mercury or something like arsenic or something, like to some tonic.
There's always a chance that it was iatrogenesis imperfectus profundi.
Say that one more time.
That iatrogenesis imperfectus profundi. Deeply imperfect physician-caused mortality. Because then the cure was often worse than the disorder.
You got to think of the times, right?
Yes.
If you're a rich guy at the times, right?
You're the best shot.
So, but then again, infectious disease was really high on the list, because this was certainly well before the antibiotic era, or even understanding of microorganisms in causing illness and disease. So I don't get tuberculosis from the history. That wouldn't be on my differential diagnosis list based on what I read.
Okay.
What about opium poisoning or maybe overdose on accident?
It didn't sound like that. That would be
throwing that out there. You said
directly related to directly related to ingestion. No, poisoning was one of the things that was conjecture. One of the conjectures was that Salieri poisoned his rival, but no.
What about his original student, though, at that time?
About his what?
About his
Who's
apprentice?
That?
Excuse me, his apprentice, Mozart?
Well, I don't know. I guess that's all. I mean, I guess there was another conjecture. It could have been a subdural hematoma based on supposedly recovering his skull after a period of time and thinking that there would be some impression. But a subdural hematoma isn't going to leave an impression on the skull, so that's not right. And it doesn't sound like it was neurologic at all. So,
do you think maybe somebody knocked him out and then made him swallow the liquid that was poison or something in that way?
I wouldn't think so.
I was trying to understand the headwind on that one.
He was ill, and it was a witness death. So they just didn't find him dead. So that would have been.
I thought you said something about the head. I couldn't.
No, somebody said that he had fallen, but people fall all the time, and they don't necessarily get subdural hematomas. So I don't think that was a viable option. So John, I would say something that affected his ability for his kidneys to work. So maybe he had an element of renal failure. That could have been from medication. It could have been from natural causes. It could have been from an infectious cause. Lots of things can cause your kidneys to shut down. So,
wow.
I don't know.
Okay. Well, I will reconsult the psychic and see what they say. It's a shame that Robin isn't here. We would love to have her here because it would be absolutely very cool to talk to her. So all I got to say is that
in that period of time they would not call it tuberculosis because that was the tubercular bacilli was not identified as a disease source at the time of Mozart's death, so it wouldn't be called tuberculosis.
Right. Nothing gastrointestinal at all either.
Tuberculosis.
Well, we'll say that there are some extenuating circumstances that it was called that. So we'll go back and do some further research, but it's interesting. And thank you for your professional guidance on that because I mean he was a genius, and he was the real genius in music, and
he's my favorite classical composer. Clearly.
He was the best of the best, and from what I've heard, he is listening, and he likes being publicized properly. So regardless of his cause of death, he likes the fact that we love his music, and I can tell you that. I can tell you that for a fact. His spirit loves that we like his music. And so anyway, another legendary ScaryCast. We had two wonderful guests, Mark Johnston and Brendan Beechler. And we've had, of course, Dr. Trey Donaway. Dr. Trey, thank you for your opinions. Devin, do you have anything else to add for tonight?
Oh, no, I've just really enjoyed the conversation.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you have. It's been a lot of fun. I am losing my voice. I don't know where I'm losing. It's like, now, Trey, you have the funniest thing in the world. Could you please tell us your comments about the McRib?
Oh, I had a McRib the other day.
Because
it's back. I had a McRib. We wanted to get a quick lunch, and we were just going to zip into the drive-thru at McDonald's, and there was a sign, and it said McRib is back. So I had a McRib. But while they were taking my order, I asked them, when did it get back? And before it got back, where was it? And nobody knows. So McRib evidently goes away to a place where nobody knows where it is before it comes back.
That's why it's a mystery meat. That's why you call it mystery meat, I think.
Exactly. Meat on multiple levels.
So it's a Schrodinger's cat of unknown origin, basically, when it comes to McRib.
Sorry.
Yes. So, I'm not sure exactly where it goes. I think they take the parts of the pig that they can't sell ordinarily, and they make it into a slurry, and then when they fill up the buckets, then they have the stuff to create McRib, and then it comes back.
Just what the doctor ordered on that one.
Oh my God!
Fucking back up or like.
Trey,
I don't like the new McRib as much as the old McRib, because I noticed on the new McRib you have the slab of McRib, whatever, or points between the Mick and the rib, and then they slather on the sauce, and then if you squeeze the bun, it kind of makes it squirt out of the bun like a ruptured disc or something. It just kind of goes sliding between the pieces of bread. But and I also had on a white shirt while I was eating McRib, and I got not a single drop on my shirt. So I think that had to have something to do with the paranormal. How can you eat a McRib and end up with a clean short if they're not paranormal forces working to protect you from McRib juice?
It's just like reading divine tea leaves, right? It's just like you know how you read the tea leaves in like a divine tea leaf reading. You got the divine McRib sauce reading on your white shirt.
On your shirt. That's right.
Yeah.
I think that we could develop a whole new domain of paranormal activity with McRib, because it has been someplace that is a mystery and nobody knows where it is, and then it comes back.
Everybody, you heard it here first. On ScaryCast.
You've heard it here on ScaryCast. Yes, this is breaking news here on ScaryCast.
It's like, where in the hell did McRib go? And it just went somewhere. You know, we're talking about Mozart and Mozart's death, the death of the greatest composer, classical composer in history. But now we have figured out where McRib goes, and we don't know. That's the answer.
And you see this in restaurants too at different times of the year. Something is back, whatever it is. Maybe there's this happy haunting ground for food, and you know how sometimes they'll cancel something. I mean, if you go to Fats Cafe, they don't have sweet potato fries anymore. They used to, but it just went away. So it could be that if McRib goes back to wherever it goes when it's not here, maybe it would lose its way and they'd never be able to recover it, and it couldn't ever come back. Now, that's a scary thought right there.
Do you guys watch Rick and Morty? You ever see the show Rick and Morty?
Yes, I'm a huge Rick and Morty fan. I've got
the Szechuan sauce. I think there was a whole episode just on that. He went in like an alternate reality and got back the Szechuan chicken sauce from, I think it was McDonald's of all places. So I think there's a whole Rick and Morty just on what we're talking about right here.
We could probably have a ScaryCast Food Network show, which would be very.
Well, we could. And this would be the crowd. It would be Devin. It would be you. It would be Brendan. And it would be Mark and me. And of course, Robin. That would be the perfect food. It would be great. And we would have the best time, and we'd probably break all records of whatever. All right. Well, guys, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. My voice, I've lost my, my voice is gone where McRib goes.
Where McRib is. Yes, where McRib goes. Yes. I hope it comes back.
My voice is gone,
just like McRib.
And I want to thank everybody. It's been a blast. It's been so much fun. And thanks. And we'll be back next week. Now, next week I've got to check. Oh my God, I've got to go to where is it? I've got to go to. This is terrible. I'm having to search I've got to go to ScaryCast on Facebook, and I don't care. I'm just searching ScaryCast. There we go. And I got to find out who our guest is. No, we've got a phenomenal guest next week, and I can't remember his name.
He just can't remember his name.
No, that's right. I can't remember his name. Kelly Bolton, and he is a reformed drug dealer, and he is making his way back to being a very successful businessman. And I met him quite by accident, and he is a fine person, and he is going to be a blockbuster. I mean, a blockbuster guest. He's going to be the caliber of Mark Johnston and Brennan Beechler. I mean, we're going to have more great guests on the one and only.
Can I mention one thing, John, too, before we go?
Yes.
So we're going to be posting every episode now to YouTube. I'll send a link. John can send you a link to our new YouTube channel, and then just like share that link out to anywhere, any Facebook page, your own Facebook page, anywhere, and let's get the word out on this podcast a little bit more through social media. That's what I think we should be doing, or like that's what we're trying to do here with this new YouTube channel. So just throwing it out there too.
Well, thank you. And I am meeting. I'll go ahead and let everybody in on the big secret. ScaryCast is the sponsor of the Duke's Mayonnaise Bowl in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, on radio on December the 30th. And I am meeting with an alumni of ScaryCast, who's Nolan Keith, the guy that plays Dr. Giggles in all the haunted houses, and he is frightening, and he's a lot of fun. I'm meeting with him in the morning, and we're planning a big party on the 30th of December, and it's going to be a blast. And there we are, hosting the Duke's Mayonnaise Bowl on TigerRadio.com, and that is the outlet for the Duke's Mayonnaise Bowl in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. So there's the big secret. We're working on it tomorrow morning, and then we have to get back to selling life insurance. So, ladies and gentlemen, it has been the most fun tonight with my friends. You know what's funny? These are all my friends. That's all they are. They're my friends, and we get together once a week, and we have a great paranormal talk. And so thanks to everybody. Thanks to Dr. Trey Donaway. Thanks to Devin Tate. Thanks to Mark Johnston. Thanks to Brendan. And we've had a blast. So we'll see you guys next week. 90 seconds left, the British lady says, with Kelly Bolton on ScaryCast. We'll see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.
Good night. Have a good evening. Enjoy.
Good night, everyone.
You as well.